My name is Jessica Cooper, and I'm 39 years old. If you ask my family about me, you'll get a mix of awkward silence and hushed rumors, as if I'm a living ghost haunting the fringes of their comfortable, respectable lives. The last time anyone in my family saw me, I was standing under the burning Texas sun at my grandmother's funeral in San Antonio, looking every bit the outsider they believed me to be. It had been 3 years since I'd last set foot in the city, and in all that time, no one had bothered to ask where I'd been or what I'd done. They just assumed, filling the silence with half-truths and wild guesses. "She's been living in her car," I'd overheard my Aunt Linda whisper to my cousin Haley, her voice low but pointed, the kind of tone meant to sound caring but always loud enough for me to catch. I heard she's been drifting around since she lost her job. Poor thing. Too much pride to come home. The gossip ran on autopilot. I'd become the family's favorite cautionary tale, a living reminder of what happens when you're too stubborn for your own good. It was easier for them to believe I was a lost cause than to consider there was more to my story. The day of the funeral, I arrived late, stepping into the small, air-conditioned chapel in a pair of faded jeans with a rip at the knee, a grey police-issue jacket 2 sizes too large, and sneakers that had clearly survived more than their share of all-nighters. My hair was tied back in a no-nonsense ponytail, streaked with the evidence of too many days on the road, and my face was bare, except for the permanent squint you get from watching too many sunrises through a dusty windshield. I wasn't trying to look poor or broken. I just didn't care about appearances anymore. My job had taught me that blending in, becoming invisible, was often the best form of armor. Let them think what they wanted. Let them think I was some burnt-out dropout who couldn't hold down a job. Truth was, the less my family, or anyone else, knew about my life, the safer I felt. Not just for myself, but for them too. I saw my mother first, perched at the front of the chapel in a tasteful black dress, her posture perfect, her expression set in practiced grief. She looked up at me, eyes flickering with a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. Beside her, my older sister Rachel sat in a navy blue suit, immaculate as always, clutching a designer handbag in her lap like it was a shield. Rachel never missed a chance to broadcast her success, and today was no different. She was the golden child of the family, partner at a high-powered Austin law firm, mother of 2, married to a surgeon with a golf club membership and a Tesla in the driveway. Every detail of her life was engineered for maximum social approval. If I was the family's ghost, Rachel was their living proof that they'd done something right. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, I almost saw the old Rachel, the one who'd sneak me out of the house for midnight milkshakes when we were kids, who'd braid my hair on the front steps and promise me that one day we'd both leave this suffocating city behind. But that Rachel was long gone, replaced by someone who looked at me now with a mixture of embarrassment and thinly veiled pity. "Jessica, you made it," a Rachel said when I approached, her voice just a notch too loud, so the whole row of aunts could hear. "I wasn't sure you'd be able to find the place. How was the drive from? Where are you living now, anyway?" I shrugged, keeping my tone light. "Here and there. You know how it is." She winced at my casual answer, but let it drop. There were too many eyes on us for her to push further. The service was short and predictable, all carefully rehearsed eulogies and floral arrangements. Grandma would have hated it. I kept to the back, arms folded, tuning out the muttered condolences and stares from relatives I hadn't seen in years. When the preacher called for the family to gather around the casket, Rachel made sure to position herself front and center, with our mother on her arm. I hung back, content to watch the spectacle unfold from a distance. It was only after the burial. During the limp reception in the church basement, that the Whisper network really kicked into gear. My Aunt Linda approached me, a sympathetic smile plastered on her face. "Jessica, honey, how are you holding up? We heard you've been having a tough time. Your mother says you're working things out, but you know you can always come stay with us if it gets too hard out there." I thanked her politely, but made no promises. I had no intention of explaining myself or my life. I'd learned, long ago, that people rarely wanted the truth. They just wanted to feel good about having offered help they secretly hoped I wouldn't accept. From across the room, I could hear Rachel filling in the blanks for a group of cousins and uncles. "She's just struggling, I guess. Lost her job with the department and hasn't really settled anywhere since. We've tried to help, but you know how stubborn Jess is." Her words stung, but I let them slide over me. If only they knew that I hadn't lost my job. In fact, I'd been promoted. What I couldn't tell them, not now or maybe ever, was that for the past several years, I'd been working deep undercover with the Los Angeles Police Department's Cybercrimes Task Force, sometimes going months without contact, sometimes living out of a suitcase or yes, even a car, but always by choice and always for reasons I could never share. For the family, my absence was a sign of failure. For me, it was the cost of doing work that mattered. The longer I stayed at that funeral, the more I felt the old walls of resentment closing in around me. Every glance, every whispered comment, was another brick in the fortress that kept me separate. But as I stood in that suffocating room, sipping bad coffee and pretending not to care, I made a silent promise to myself. If my family was determined to believe I was lost, I'd let them. Sometimes, letting people underestimate you is the only way to truly be free. The thing about family legends is that once they take root, there's no stopping them. My story had spread through every branch of the Cooper clan like wildfire, a cautionary tale for anyone who ever dreamed of coloring outside the lines. No matter what I actually did, no matter how hard I worked or how far I traveled, I was always the one who couldn't make it work. After the funeral, the Whispers followed me outside to the parking lot. It was a blazing July afternoon. Heat shimmered off the hoods of rental SUVs and minivans. I stopped at the curb, fishing my keys out of my jacket pocket, aware of Rachel's gaze fixed on my every move. Even now, she couldn't help herself. She approached with her practiced smile, the one she used in courtrooms and charity events. "Jess, can I talk to you for a second?" she asked, lowering her voice. "Mom's worried." "We all are. You haven't called in months. Aunt Linda says you're sleeping in your car. Are you okay?" I gave her the smallest of smiles. "I'm fine, Ratch." "Really?" She sighed, tucking a strand of perfectly highlighted hair behind her ear. "You know, you could stay with us in Austin for a while. Get back on your feet. Eric has connections in the police department. Maybe he could help you find something. It doesn't have to be like this." There was a time, years ago, when that offer would have meant something to me. Back before I understood the rules of my world. I could see she meant well, in her own way. But she'd never quite understood that a helpie wasn't always helpful, especially when it came with conditions and judgments attached. "I appreciate it, but I'm good," I said, my tone firmer now. "I like what I'm doing." Rachel's brow furrowed in frustration. "What is it you're actually doing, Jess? You never say. You never visit. You miss every birthday, every holiday. It's like you don't want to be part of this family anymore." I thought about telling her the truth, about the nights spent in unmarked vans outside suspect safe houses, the days combing through digital trails to stop cyber attacks before they could bring a city to its knees, the times I've been closer to danger than she could imagine. But I knew she wouldn't understand. She didn't want the truth. She wanted the Jessica she remembered from childhood. The little sister who always followed her lead. Instead, I just shrugged. I'm sorry, Ratch. Work's complicated. I can't talk about it. Rachel shook her head, disappointment etched deep in her features. You know, Mom says you're just proud. But I think you're hiding. You don't have to pretend with us. Pretend. If only she knew. By now, the rest of the family was loading into their cars, eager to escape the heat and the awkwardness of another Cooper family gathering. I watched as my mother lingered near the exit, glancing back at me with that same hopeful anxiety she'd worn since I was a teenager. When she finally approached, she tried to keep her tone light. Jessica, honey, do you need anything? Some money for gas, maybe? I know things have been hard since. You know. Since I lost my job, she meant. Since I stopped being the daughter she could brag about at Bridge Club. No, Mom, I'm okay. Really? She squeezed my hand, her grip small and frail but impossibly strong. You know, I worry about you. I just want you to be happy. If you ever need to come home. I smiled for her, because that's what daughters do. But there was no home for me anymore, not the kind she meant, anyway. I slipped behind the wheel of my battered Ford sedan, letting the familiar comfort of the driver's seat steady me. As I pulled away from the church, I watched Rachel in my rearview mirror, arms crossed, watching me like she might never see me again. The drive out of San Antonio was long and hot, but I didn't mind. Out here, with the endless highway stretching ahead and no one's expectations pressing down on me, I could finally breathe. I turned up the radio, letting the static and country music fill the space where family used to live. They would talk about me after I was gone, spinning my absence into another thread of family legend. Jessica Cooper, the wild one, the wanderer, the disappointment. They'd never know about the calls that came in the middle of the night, the encrypted texts from supervisors who trusted me with more than I could ever explain to my family, the pride I felt every time a case closed safely, quietly, without fanfare. And that was okay. Let them believe I was drifting. Let them think I was lost. The truth was, I'd chosen this life, chosen to serve, to protect, to disappear when necessary. I was living by my own rules, even if that meant living in the shadows of the people who loved me. In some strange way, that was its own kind of freedom. Out there, as the Texas sun slid down behind the horizon, I drove on, just another anonymous car on the interstate, carrying secrets no one would ever ask about. Back in Los Angeles, the city felt both impossibly huge and strangely intimate. Every siren, every flash of red and blue lights, every radio call in the darkness was a language I understood better than the clipped, polite questions of my family. In this world, I had purpose. I had a badge, one that meant something, even if it couldn't buy me a seat at my family's table. My official title was Senior Cyber Crimes Investigator, LAPT. I'd joined the force young, straight out of a criminal justice program at the University of Arizona, and made detective by 26. But the deeper I got into law enforcement, the more I realized that the real battles weren't always fought on the streets. The biggest dangers didn't always look like bad guys with guns. Sometimes, they wore expensive suits and hid behind encrypted messages, trying to cripple hospitals or steal the life savings of people who would never even know my name. That was the world I inhabited, Long nights in windowless rooms lit by the glow of a dozen monitors, chasing digital shadows through bank records, phone logs, and the darkest corners of the internet. Most of my colleagues never saw the inside of a courtroom. My job was to stop the disaster before it happened, to keep a blackout from shutting down an entire city, to stop ransomware from holding a children's hospital hostage, to find the patterns no one else could see. If my family ever pictured me at work, they'd probably imagine me patrolling some dangerous neighborhood, maybe running down a purse snatcher or chasing car thieves through alleyways. In truth, my world was quieter but no less dangerous. Some nights I slept in the office, catching a few hours on a cot with my phone under my pillow in case an urgent tip came through. Other times, I'd be on the road for days, following the digital breadcrumbs left by international gangs who could launder millions with a few keystrokes. To outsiders, and even to some people in the department, my life looked lonely, maybe even sad. I didn't date much. Most of my friends were other officers, or sometimes just people who understood what it meant to answer a phone at 3 a.m. and be ready for anything. Holidays were often just another shift. Birthdays, anniversaries, even the news about Rachel's first engagement, these all became distant, unimportant markers in a life where everything was urgent and nothing was quite real. Yet I loved it. In my best moments, I was part of a team that saved people from disasters they never even knew threatened them. When I walked into the evidence room or ran an operation from the mobile command unit, I felt powerful and necessary, feelings that were always in short supply at family gatherings. There were risks, of course. The job demanded secrecy. I'd learned to lie with a straight face, to answer questions with a vague shrug. I'm between assignments, I'd tell Rachel, or I'm working on a special project. The truth was, I was constantly working on special projects. Operations with code names that sounded like action movies. Weeks spent deep undercover, blending into hacker forums or posing as a corrupt cop to gain trust and access. Those years living out of my car? Sometimes it was true, but not the way my family imagined. My unmarked Ford was kitted out with surveillance gear and a secure laptop in the trunk. There were weeks when I practically lived behind the wheel, eating gas station sandwiches and sleeping in the car while watching a suspect's apartment or waiting for a handoff in a dark parking lot. It was gritty, uncomfortable, and exactly what I'd signed up for. That is shabby a jacket Rachel always mocked. It was police issue, with built-in body armor panels. The sneakers? Chosen for their grip and ability to run on any surface, not because I couldn't afford better. I had a service pistol in a hidden holster and a badge clipped inside my jacket, but I never showed them to my family. It was easier to let them believe what they wanted. There was a strange comfort in that invisibility. As long as I stayed off their radar, I could keep doing the work that mattered to me. My anonymity wasn't just a shield, it was a gift. The less my family knew, the safer we all were. I knew too many stories of cops whose families became targets, or at the very least, whose lives were torn apart by the stress of secrets they couldn't share. Still, there were nights, long, lonely hours between assignments, when I wondered what it would be like to have a normal life. To show up at Thanksgiving in a nice dress, with a husband and maybe a kid or two, and a simple job title everyone could understand. There were moments I missed being someone's little sister, someone's daughter, not just a ghost with a badge. But whenever I lingered on that thought too long, the job would call again. A tip about a new phishing scam targeting local schools. A lead on a group trying to breach the city's emergency systems. Another anonymous phone call, another urgent message, another problem that only I could solve. In the end, it was the work that kept me moving. The sense of responsibility. The knowledge that if I didn't show up, maybe no one else would. That was my reality, unseen, unspoken, and, for all its hardships, uniquely mine. If there was one thing the Cooper family excelled at, it was creating legends, especially about Rachel. From the moment she won her first spelling bee in 3rd grade, she'd been the star. By the time she was in high school, Rachel was already a going places, homecoming queen, debate team captain, full ride to Yale. Our mother liked to remind anyone within earshot that Rachel had graduated at the top of her law class, snagged an internship with a famous judge, and married the most eligible bachelor in Dallas. At family gatherings, Rachel's life was always the centerpiece. She'd glide through the room in an immaculate dress, fielding compliments on her adorable kids, they're learning French and Mandarin, her husband's latest award, Eric was named one of the top cardiovascular surgeons under 40, and the perfectly manicured house in Highland Park. Even her golden retriever, Tucker, was a minor celebrity, once featured on a local news segment about Dallas's most adorable pets. In those moments, I felt almost invisible. No one asked about me, except in the way you ask about the weather, a polite formality, never expecting more than a vague answer. Rachel never let anyone forget my absence, though. At every birthday or holiday, if I couldn't make it, because of an overnight shift or an out-of-town operation, she'd bring it up, her tone hovering between concern and subtle accusation. Jessica's got work, you know. She's busy. We can't expect her to drop everything for family. But there was always an edge, a hint that my choices weren't just different, but wrong. On some level, I understood it. Rachel had always been the one who stayed in touch, who sent cards on Mother's Day, who made time for phone calls and planned family reunions. I admired her ability to organize her life, to make everything look easy, even when I suspected it wasn't. But what no one saw was the effort behind the scenes. The nights she called me, tipsy on wine after putting her kids to bed, confessing how exhausted she was from trying to keep up appearances. The fights with Eric about his schedule, the passive-aggressive texts from her mother-in-law about Rachel's messy garden, the anxiety she felt every time she had to host a dinner party for his colleagues. Rachel never admitted to struggling, not even to me. But I recognized the signs, a flicker of doubt in her voice, the pause before answering a question about work, the frustration in her tone when talking about the kids' endless activities. For all her outward perfection, she was just as trapped by expectations as I was. The difference was, she lived for other people's approval, while I'd learned to live without it. The irony was sharp. While Rachel managed property disputes and mediated messy divorces, I was tracking threats that could cripple entire cities. She worried about PTA meetings and getting the kids to soccer practice on time. I worried about the next big cyber attack, or whether the hospital's IT system was about to go dark. She earned applause and Instagram likes. I earned anonymous commendations, sometimes a quiet thank you from a grateful victim, but never the kind of recognition that got you a toast at Thanksgiving. I remember one Thanksgiving particularly well, a year before Grandma died. Rachel hosted the whole family in her sprawling Dallas house, the table groaning with food catered from the best place in town. There was laughter, wine, and the kind of forced cheer that always cracks after a few hours. When someone brought up my absence, Rachel's voice was just loud enough. Oh well, you know Jess. Always on the move. We never really know what she's doing. Full scholarship to UA, promoted early, but it's all gone a bit sideways, hasn't it? Everyone nodded in sage agreement. Such a shame, Aunt Linda added, as she was always so smart. I let them talk. It was easier than correcting them. The truth was far more complicated and less palatable to the Cooper family narrative. Rachel's first marriage had unraveled, though the family spun it as a growing apart and a finding her true self. The reality, whispered only in late-night calls, was that she'd had an affair with a client. It was messy and humiliating, and for a while she nearly lost custody of the kids. But by Christmas, all anyone remembered was her new engagement to Eric, and how perfectly her life had snapped back into place. Redemption, Cooper style. The thing about family legends is that they leave no room for nuance. Rachel was always the hero, I was always the shadow, necessary for contrast, but never meant to step into the light. I sometimes wondered if, deep down, Rachel missed the old us, the girls who'd climb the willow tree in our backyard, sharing secrets and promises of running away to California. Or if she was grateful for the neat symmetry, her life so perfectly aligned, mine so conveniently askew. What neither of us could admit, not even in the quietest moments, was that we both envied parts of each other's life. She envied my freedom. I envied her certainty. But we were both trapped, in our own ways, by the stories the family needed to tell. All of this simmered beneath the surface as the next invitation arrived, one that would force us both to confront the truth about who we really were and how much of our stories were built on illusion. The envelope came on a Monday, crisp, heavy, pale blue with gold script, nestled between a stack of bills and a pizza coupon in my mailbox outside my Los Feliz apartment. I almost didn't notice it at first. But then I saw the return address, the Saunders family, Miami Beach. My first instinct was to toss it. Over the years, I developed a sixth sense for which pieces of family correspondence were worth opening. Birth announcements? Sometimes. Christmas cards? Almost never. Wedding invitations? Definitely not. But something made me pause, and I slid a finger beneath the fancy flap. Inside, I found a card thick as cardboard, engraved with the names Rachel Cooper and Dr. Eric Saunders. It was official. The wedding would be held at Eric's family's estate, just outside Miami. White sand, palm trees, valet parking, the works. Black tie preferred, the invitation declared. Reception to follow. As I was about to set it aside, a smaller, handwritten note slipped out. The handwriting was unmistakable, Rachel's tall, looping script, the kind she'd practiced since junior high. Jess, I know things have been difficult, but you're my sister. Please, if you can, try to clean up and come. Eric's family will be there, and I want them to see that we're normal. Love, Rach. That word, normal, landed like a stone in my stomach. It was always about appearances with Rachel, and now with her new in-laws watching, she needed me not just to show up, but to perform. I folded the note and card, slipping them back in the envelope, and set it on the counter, unsure if I felt more insulted or amused. The truth was, I didn't know if I could handle another Cooper family event, not after the last funeral. The memory of those judgmental glances, the forced small talk, and the way Rachel performed our relationship for the benefit of anyone listening, they still stung. But something about her note stuck with me, maybe because it sounded almost genuine under all the expectation. That night, I lay awake on my sagging mattress, the LA city lights flickering through the blinds, thinking about what it meant to be a normal. If I went, I'd be expected to look and act a certain way, no mention of late-night stakeouts, bulletproof vests, or the time I'd spent undercover chasing a ring of cybercriminals through half a dozen cities. I'd have to explain the gaps in my resume, the reason I couldn't bring a date, the way I sometimes flinched at sudden loud noises or left a crowded room for no obvious reason. But I also knew I needed a break from the job. The last operation had left me on edge. 3 months of tense, sleepless nights, chasing a group of hackers who were extorting money from hospitals up and down the West Coast. We'd finally caught them, but the debriefing had been brutal, and the department psychologist insisted I take mandatory leave. Reconnect with civilian life, Cooper, and my captain had said, sliding a coffee across the table. Try not to work for a week. That's an order. So maybe, I reasoned, this wedding was my chance. Not for Rachel, not for the family, but for myself. To see if I could still function outside the world of blue lights and confidential files. To prove, if only to myself, that I hadn't become a ghost, a stranger to my own life. A few days later, I sent a text, short, almost defiant. I'll be there. Jess. No emoji, no promise of a cleaning up, just the basic commitment. Rachel replied almost immediately, Thank you, Jess. It means a lot. Please, just try to make a good impression. For me. I rolled my eyes but smiled despite myself. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I kept to myself, filling the empty hours with long walks through Griffith Park, late-night movies, and the kind of simple, solitary routines I perfected over years of shift work. My badge and service weapons stayed locked in the safe. I made an effort to blend in, shopping at the local farmers market, volunteering for a neighborhood cleanup, even joining my upstairs neighbor for yoga on the roof. I'd almost convinced myself I could parse as a normal-y if I tried. But as the date approached, the old anxiety crept back in. I went shopping for a dress, only to leave the store empty-handed, overwhelmed by the sea of silk and lace. Nothing felt right. Everything felt like a costume. In the end, I packed my old funeral jeans, a black blazer, and a button-down shirt. Simple, practical, just tidy enough to get by. Let them think what they wanted, I decided. At least I'd show up as myself. The day before the flight, I got a call from my mother. Her voice was thin and nervous, the way it always got before big events. Jessica, honey, do you have your ticket? Rachel is very excited you're coming. Eric's parents are particular. Maybe you could try a little extra this time, for your sister's sake? I promised I'd do my best and left it at that. I landed in Miami to a wall of humid air and the scent of salt water. The city was all neon and pastel, palm trees swaying above endless streams of traffic. At the rental counter, the clerk glanced at my ID and then at my clothes, raising an eyebrow before handing me the keys to a small, battered sedan. I laughed. In a sea of luxury SUVs and convertibles, my ride felt like a fitting metaphor for my place in the family. Driving up to the Saunders estate was like entering another world, white stucco walls, a manicured lawn, guests in evening wear sipping champagne under fairy lights. I parked at the far end of the gravel drive, took a deep breath, and stepped out, heart pounding as if I were walking into an undercover sting, not a family celebration. As I made my way to the entrance, I caught sight of Rachel through the glass doors, her face bright, surrounded by friends and new in-laws. She didn't see me at first, and I took a second to compose myself, gathering all the confidence I could muster. This wasn't my world, but for tonight, I'd try to belong. Or at least, not give them more to whisper about. The first thing I noticed about the Saunders estate was that it was built to impress. White columns, marble steps, and a driveway full of cars so shiny I could see my reflection as I walked past. Valets eyed me, uncertain, as I headed toward the entrance in my pressed but simple clothes. For a moment, I wondered if they'd stop me at the door. I walked taller, letting the old police confidence fill me up. The trick was to act like you belonged, even when you didn't. Inside, everything gleamed. Strings of lights draped from the ceiling. Crystal glasses glittered on every surface, the air thick with laughter and expensive perfume. Waiters in black ties moved soundlessly, offering trays of canapés I couldn't pronounce. I caught glimpses of Rachel everywhere, her laughter floating above the crowd, her dress perfect, her hair glossy, her smile wide and a little too fixed. I arrived 40 minutes late, on purpose. Part of me hoped I could slip in, unnoticed, just another guest at the edge of the room. But as soon as I stepped into the main hall, the energy changed. Conversation dipped and faces turned, some curious, some concerned. It was the kind of attention I was used to on a crime scene, not at a family wedding. At the far end, Rachel was holding court by the bar, Eric's arm around her waist. The two of them looked like a magazine ad for a perfect life. She saw me, and her face flickered through a slideshow of emotions, relief, embarrassment, worry, before she pulled herself together. "Jessica, is she called?" Her voice too bright, too loud. "You made it." Heads turned. Eric's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Saunders, stood nearby, their posture stiff with a kind of practiced graciousness that never let you forget they were judging everything. Rachel beckoned me over, and I braced myself, weaving through the crowd as quietly as possible. She gave me a quick, careful hug, her hands fluttering at my shoulders like she wasn't sure how close she wanted to be. "I'm glad you're here," she whispered, but her eyes darted around as if checking who was watching. "Jessica, this is Eric's mother and father," she said, her social smile snapping back into place. "Jessica, so lovely you could join us," Mrs. Saunders said, the words stretched thin with politeness. She wore pearls and a smile that could cut glass. "Rachel tells us you work with law enforcement?" Mr. Saunders asked, voice cool, eyes narrowing as if searching for details that didn't fit. "I do," I said simply, knowing better than to elaborate. Rachel rushed to fill the silence. "Jessica's been in between things, but she's figuring it out. She's always been so independent." I caught a flash of something in Eric's mother's eyes. Pity? Skepticism? I couldn't tell. I gave her a polite nod and tried not to think about how little I fit in here. The small talk shifted around me, awkward and careful. People's eyes flicked over my outfit, my hands, my shoes. I felt them drawing conclusions. They didn't see a detective, or a woman who'd pulled victims out of burning cars, or stopped a cyber attack on a city hospital. They saw a sister who hadn't settled down, who drove a beat-up car, who didn't look put together. I found myself pressed against the edge of the party, close to the French doors leading out to the patio. My mother joined me, giving me a quick, nervous hug. "Honey, I'm glad you came," she said, but her voice was low. Rachel was worried. "Maybe next time, you could wear something brighter? For pictures?" I laughed softly, more out of habit than amusement. "Sure, Mom. I'll try." For a while, I drifted through the reception like a ghost, sipping sparkling water and listening to half-familiar voices talk about mortgages and private schools, vacation homes, and mutual funds. I watched Rachel glide through the room, always turning up the charm for whoever she was with, her life seemingly as perfect as the setting. She looked over at me ever so often, her expression a strange mix of apology and relief, like she'd succeeded in convincing everyone that I was harmless, a minor embarrassment, nothing more. Later, I overheard Eric's mother talking to Rachel by the windows. Their voices were low, but the acoustics of money carry. She seems troubled. Rachel. Is she going to be a problem? Oh, no, Rachel replied quickly. She's harmless. She's just never really figured out how to be an adult. All that intelligence, but no common sense. She peaked in college. Been couch surfing, won't take help. My stomach clenched. I'd heard worse on the job, but never from my own family. At least she's not asking for money tonight, a Mrs. Saunders said. Rachel's laugh was brittle. Give it time. She always does eventually. I walked away before I could hear more. But something inside me snapped. All these years, I'd let them believe the story they wanted. The story where I was lost, broken, too proud to accept their help. I'd played the role for so long I'd almost forgotten what the truth felt like. As the party blurred around me, I realized I had a choice. I could keep being their family ghost, their private embarrassment. Or I could finally let them see who I really was, for better or worse. For the first time all night, I felt a flicker of resolve. Maybe it was time to step out of the shadows and let the truth do the talking. I barely remember the rest of the party. The conversations around me turned into a blur of clinking glasses and shallow laughter, the music from the live band swelling and fading with the night. I kept running over Rachel's words in my head. Peaked in college, harmless, won't take help, always comes for money eventually. It was like a refrain, echoing from every side of the grand reception hall. I moved through the crowd unnoticed, a ghost at my own sister's celebration. It was almost funny, in a way only a cop can find funny. All those years I'd worked to stay invisible for the sake of my work, and now invisibility had become my cage. They defined me by my silence, my absence, my refusal to share the details of a life they wouldn't believe even if I tried to explain it. That night, as the guests danced under the white tent, I found myself staring out at the ocean beyond the lawn. The sound of the waves was steady and calming, a welcome contrast to the brittle, artificial cheer behind me. In that moment, I decided I was done being the family embarrassment. I was done letting them tell my story. I pulled out my phone and scrolled down to the contact I hadn't used since the last big operation. Captain Torres, the name read, my commanding officer in the Cybercrimes Division. I hesitated only a second before dialing. Torres here, came the brisk, no-nonsense voice. It's Cooper, I said quietly, stepping away from the light so no one could hear me. I need a favor. Something official. I need to borrow a marked car and a set of dress blues. Not for an op, personal reasons. Family. There was a short pause on the line. He knew enough about my family history not to ask too many questions. You all right? I'm fine. Just time they saw the truth. Torres's tone softened. You got it. Where and when? I told him. Send the car to the Saunders estate, by midnight if you can. Just make it official. He agreed. Give them hell, Cooper. I hung up and pocketed my phone, feeling a small surge of adrenaline, the same feeling I'd get before a raid or a big arrest. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but for once, I wasn't hiding. Back at the party, I made myself rejoin the crowd. Rachel was dancing with Eric under the string lights, her new family watching with pride. My mother was chatting with an aunt I barely recognized, her laughter forced and uncertain. Eric's parents were in deep conversation with a judge from Miami, no doubt discussing a good families and a proper careers. I drifted until I was cornered at the family table by Judge Saunders himself. He leaned over, voice pitched just low enough to signal both authority and concern. "Your mother tells me you're in law enforcement. I have a few friends on the Miami force. Perhaps I could make a call, see if anyone needs a capable young woman on their team." It was meant as charity, a favor from someone who'd never had to start at the bottom, who'd never spent a night worrying about payroll or overtime or the look on a victim's face when you told them the system failed. I looked him in the eye and said, "A thank you, Judge. I have a job I'm very proud of." He raised his eyebrows, and I could see the question in his eyes. "If you're so proud, why do you look like that? Why do you act like that?" But I didn't owe him an answer. Rachel found me a few minutes later, her cheeks flushed from dancing, her smile wide and brittle. "Jess, are you doing okay? Mum said you looked a little overwhelmed. If you need to leave." "I'm fine," I said. For the first time, my voice was steady, strong. "I'm not going anywhere." She blinked, clearly surprised by the resolve she heard. "Okay, good. I'm glad you came. I know it must be weird, all of this." We stood in silence for a beat too long, two sisters with a lifetime of words unsaid between them. Before she could press further, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Torres. "Suv's outside. Dress uniforms in the back seat. Credentials in the glove box. Knock 'em dead." I looked at Rachel, a calm certainty settling over me. "I'll be right back," I said. Out front, the lapped black SUV looked wildly out of place among the Jaguars and Teslas. The officer at the wheel, Detective Morales, a friend, handed me the uniform in a dry cleaning bag and gave me a silent nod of encouragement. Inside the guest bathroom, I changed quickly, hands steady as I buttoned up the crisp blue shirt and pinned on my medals. The uniform fit perfectly, even after months in plain clothes. I clipped my badge at my hip, fastened my belt, checked my hair in the mirror. For the first time in years, I saw not just the person I had to be for work, but the woman I'd always been. When I stepped back into the light of the ballroom, heads turned. The laughter faded. The band paused. My mother's mouth fell open. Rachel stood frozen, her wine glass halfway to her lips. I crossed the room, each step heavy with the weight of truth I'd carried for years. At the family table, I placed my credentials on the white tablecloth. "Sorry for the interruption," I said, my voice echoing off marble floors and decades of family legend. "But I thought it was time you knew who I really am."